Citizens' Assemblies could wake up Sir Keir Starmer to reversing Brexit. We're going to read into this more from Byline Times, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an article from Byline Times with the headline that Citizens' Assemblies could wake up Sir Keir Starmer to reversing Brexit. The polls show that the public would now vote to rejoin the EU. So why isn't the Prime Minister listening? Guys, while you're here, make sure you hit the like button and share this across social media so others are notified of this video. So why isn't Keir Starmer listening? Well, because it's too early to make this decision. Now, first and foremost here, yes, I do agree about citizens' assemblies, and I think this is going to be a very good thing. Especially, it will drive more engagement, especially on the community level. We need more community engagement with local politicians and local governments to ensure that the needs of local areas are definitely would help. Now, will this be a wake-up call for Keir Starmer? Absolutely not. I don't expect Keir Starmer's position to change at all. By the power of Citizens' Assembly. I don't agree with this headline from Byline Times here. Even if the public are in favour of rejoining the European Union, and it's saying here, so why isn't the Prime Minister listening? Well, you have to apply a little bit of common sense here, guys. So first and foremost, we can't just rejoin the EU. It doesn't work like that. That's the first thing. You can't just literally say we want to go back in. No, there's a process and you have to follow that process. That's the first thing. And it's a long process as well. So that's the first thing. Second thing is obviously you can't... The second thing is, of course, you're going to start up a conversation that has torn a lot of families apart, that divided the country, really did divide, not divide the country, divided the UK as a whole. You upset as well. So a lot of people will be bringing back bad times. They don't really want to have that conversation. I just don't think people are ready to have that conversation as well. And I don't think people want to talk about Brexit in such a regard. I can understand why people want to talk about it. I totally understand that. And I'm somebody that wants to rejoin the EU single market and customs union. But it's too soon to have this conversation. It really is. I understand the anger and I understand the frustration of people who are impatient and want something done now. And this is where the next bit comes in. Another reason why he's not listening is because the EU don't trust us. The European Union doesn't trust us. And why do I say that? Well, 14 years of Conservative does break down that trust. I would say that perhaps they were a bit more in favour of having conversations with Keir Starmer and the Labour government because they're not a bunch of liars like the Conservatives have been for 14 years. I think that's a very important point. They definitely have been a bunch of liars for quite a while. A long time. The whole Brexit negotiation has been a shambles. The deal that Boris Johnson got was a shambles. I also think that we have to remember that we never kept our side of the bargain. We kept kicking the can down the road when it comes to the implementations on our side of the Brexit deal with the EU. While they've been doing their bit, we've not done ours on our side. So because we've not fulfilled our ends of the bargain, why should they even consider us rejoining the EU? Even if it benefits them and benefits us, why would they want to make that conversation? Another reason is because the EU have got other things to deal with as well. The EU have got other priorities, immigration, for example, among many other things that are taking place in Europe right now. It's not a key priority for them to have that discussion anyway. So that's another reason. From Keir Starmer's point of view, we've just had the London UK riots. We do have a cost of living crisis. We have a broken NHS system, among many other crises that are taking place within the whole of the UK that needs to be dealt with. Again, this Brexit is an issue and needs to be addressed, but we have other priorities, in my opinion, that we need to deal with first. Like, for example, people aren't getting paid properly, hence why he's sorting out the public sector pay, for example, as well. That's one thing. Obviously, we're streeting, don't trust the guy whatsoever, but we got a broken national healthcare service. Kind of need to prioritise that so we can stop people being sick, stuck on benefits, and get them back off the benefits get them off benefits so they can actually work and contribute to society instead of being stuck at home because they can't work because they're unable to get the appointments and operations that they need. So, again, there are other priorities. So, I understand the frustration, but we have to be realistic. And I've said this before and I've said this again. Like, it's going to take a few decades. It's not going to something that's going to happen in a few years. It's just not. You have to be realistic here. Like, and even is another reason. Like, even if Keir Starmer acknowledged it, yeah, and said we need to undo Brexit, right? Do you think the Conservatives are gonna go along with it? And who's to say that the Conservatives can't go back in power again? Who's to say that Reform can't take power in the future? Do you honestly think that those parties are going to be on board with us rejoining the EU? No, of course not. So what's the point of us applying to rejoin the EU single market and customs union and rejoin the European Union if Reform and the Conservatives or the Conservatives just take it away again? You need to have... I don't think it's enough that, let's say, more than 50% of the public are in favour of rejoining the EU. That's not enough for me. You need all political parties. You need a high percentage of those political parties, and I say high percentage of them, more than 50% of both those of all the political parties in favour of wanting to rejoin the EU. Mainly Conservatives and Labour, mainly. I mean, Reform at the moment, they don't have enough influence. But if they were to gain enough influence, obviously you would need to sway them. So there are so many factors in this. So when they say, why isn't the Prime Minister listing? I've just given you a bunch of reasons there. And I'm sure some of you guys in the comments have a whole bunch more anyway. But let's read into what Byline Times have had to say on this, you guys. So on a visit to Wales during the election campaign, Keir Starmer said he didn't think the UK would join the EU in his lifetime. Now, I don't agree with that assessment. I do think we will rejoin the EU within his lifetime. But it will be a long time. The reference to his lifetime seems to have been fed to him by the questioner. And what Starmer said is, I've been really clear about not rejoining the EU, the single market or customs union, or return to freedom of movement. But that clearly rules out rejoining the EU or the single market under his leadership. Starmer's comments were made as the latest poll showed that 61% of Brits, including some 78% of Labour voters, would vote to rejoin the EU. Yeah, 61% still is a good, but it's all well and good, but it's about convincing the politicians to get behind it as well. It's all well and good converting voters over, but you've got to convert the politicians, and you've got to convert the political parties. You can't just do this with Labour. It's not going to work like that. As long as there are people on the so-called right who are against any kind of rejoining, as long as there is that group there, until you change their minds about the European Union, there's no point pushing to rejoin, because it's just going to get pulled back again the moment we try to go back in. So you have to be realistic about these things. So why has Starmer left himself no wiggle room on joining the EU or single market? Labour's number one mission for government is to achieve the highest growth in the G7. And to be more precise, top of the G7 list for growth per person for 2 years running by the time of the next election. This is something the UK never quite achieved as an EU member, though it came close in 2001-2003. If Labour's ambitions for the UK include such high levels of growth, then ruling out the EU or single market membership seems perverse. Unless perhaps you factor in some of the political headwinds Starmer has to contend with. Nothing to say that he says or does now closer EU trade links can help UK's economic growth much or at all over the next 5 years. And then there are electoral considerations. Voters in general don't see Brexit as being all that important, while 39% of Leavers would be put off supporting Labour if it reopened the question of EU membership. Support for the EU looks suspiciously soft-centred in its focusing on joining the single market and customs union, with little thought to say, commenting on the euro making a major contribution to the £220 billion cost of EU enlargement, financing the EU through a joint debt, aka euro bonds, or rejoining the EU that is increasingly influenced by the far right. Yet those issues might trouble viewers if rejoining the EU becomes a subject of active political condemnation in the UK. Took me a while to get my thoughts together about that word. That said, the route that Starmer is taking is unnecessary and unsatisfactory. It leaves many voters, not to mention businesses, frustrated over the government's attitude to closer links to the EU. Now, I agree. I absolutely 100% agree that businesses are understandably upset about the fact that we're not doing more to connect with the Europe. I totally understand that. But the political landscape makes it near to next impossible for it. You have to understand the political landscape. And the thing is that we don't want to let the Conservatives back into power. And I really stress, look at the last 14 years, guys. Look at the last 14 years. Look at your shops, look at your communities, look at your high streets. Look at what's happened to everything in there. We do not want to give the Conservatives a reason to get to people. We don't want to give people a reason to vote Conservative. We really don't. And I generally believe that they will make things easier for businesses. It's just going to take time, and I know they're frustrated over it. It will take time, but I do think they will reduce the red tape for businesses. It's just a case of how they're going to get about it. The government seems frozen in the headlines of its own uncertainties, afraid to discuss EU or single market membership, even as long-term options, for fear of what might happen if the discussions get serious. What Starmer's government needs to do is better understand the sort of EU links Brits would be willing to accept. That might confirm that he's not in his lifetime approach to the EU and single market, or it might give him the confidence to try something different. The way forward could be a series of citizens' assemblies to find out what people think about the EU links when they are presented with information and debate about opinions before they are asked to express a view on them. A citizens' assembly is a quadrum leap beyond polling opinion. It is a cross-section of society, as many as 150 strong, who are brought together for several days to learn, debate an issue and reach conclusions about what they think should happen. Key advantages of assemblies are expert knowledge that is made available, that discussion is fair and fact-based. Assemblies are said to have a signpost function, letting politicians know where people want to go with concrete measures and revealing the solutions that would have a majority support. Downing Street Chief of Staff Sue Gray has argued that Labour should use assemblies to get involved in declining contentious issues such as constitutional reform, devolution and housing. Polling organisation Ipsos has welcomed this, with the caveat that assemblies must be managed with due diligence and integrity, which is essential. Options right for the scrutiny of assembly, including a completely new UK-EU trade agreement, membership of the EU or the EU single market, and a customs union between the UK and the EU. It will be important for the focus of each case to be on a political and governance issue, as well as better trade links. Joining the single market is probably on a good trade option, but the UK applying EU laws without having a say in their adoption might not be a good governance option. Political and governance issues around EU membership are complex and could need multiple assemblies. Yeah, I understand us not being at the table doesn't help as well. But again, you have to look at the political landscape that we are in right now. The objective of the Citizens' Assemblies agenda on the UK EU would not be lobbied for rejoining by stealth. That's what I technically think. Yeah, that Labour are going to be trying to do, is trying to rejoin by stealth. It would be searching for future links with the EU that would be acceptable in the UK. When that is settled, politicians can decide whether the UK needs to explore new options with the EU. We might discover that support for rejoining is more than skin deep, or country-wise, that the politicians of the EU can turn off many Brits for it to work. But big surprise for Starmer and his advisors could not be ruled out. We might find, for example, that Brits would opt for economic advantages from membership of the single market, even if the UK had no say in EU laws applying in the UK. But finding answers to these questions will help politicians plan for the future. It might help businesses too, who could focus their efforts to influence governments on options that the public seem likely to support. And it would help all of us to learn more about the implementations of different options for our futures links with the EU. You have institutions capable of organising citizens' assembly in an independent and rigorous impartial way. Institutions such as the Institute of Government and UK in a Changing Europe, or a new body that could be set up. Politicians should have no role in the process whatsoever. A citizen assembly project on the UK-EU links could be privately funded and might qualify for funding from UK research and innovation. Whereas where there's a will, there's a way. A citizen assembly project could bring the UK's future relation with the EU back on the political agenda without forcing politicians to take positions before they are ready. I'm still not 100% convinced that I still don't think Citizens Assembly is going to. I do think it'll bring up the conversations in those Citizens Assembly, but it's not going to force politicians to talk about the issue. Like I said, the political landscape at the moment is just because people don't want to have that conversation enough. And I just think from a political point of view, when you have at least a third of the population voted for Reform UK, yes, they did vote on immigration, but do you think that some of that, but it's entirely, but many of them obviously, and the Conservatives still had the second largest vote. And as long as those kind of political parties that have so many voters behind them, as long as they are against going back into the EU, like you have to convince people. You have to convince people. Otherwise you're just falling. There's no. What's the point of having this discussion? Like I said, it's all well and good getting the public on side. You got to convince the politicians, and just as importantly, you got to convince the political parties, not just Labour, not just the fringe parties. You've got to get the parties on board. If you don't, there is no point having this discussion, because it will just all get undone again. That's the reality. So when Keir Starmer says not in his lifetime, I'm talking about the next, as long as he's Prime Minister, not for another good, like I said, maybe in 4 or 5, maybe in 10 years' time, maybe there'll be serious talk. But we are going to keep talking about Brexit. There's no question about it. It's not going to go away, because as long as we have it, we will always be worse off. Businesses will always be worse off. But the problem is the political landscape, not just about whether or not people want it or not. Hell, we could have 80% of the population behind it. Unless politicians are willing to back it, at the end of the day, it's down to politicians and political parties what they want to do. We're the ones who vote them in and out. So it's down to us to change the politicians and change political parties if we want to change views, not just the public itself. But what do you guys honestly think? What do you guys make about the Citizens' Assembly? Do you honestly believe that it would wake Keir Starmer up to reversing Brexit? What are your thoughts on reversing Brexit? Do you agree with some of the barriers that are in the way of why Keir Starmer is not listening? Let me know your thoughts and more down in the comment section below. If you found this video interesting, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate it. Share this across social media so others are notified of this video. And subscribe, because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to go one step further, financially support me and the work that I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p. Or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.